this evening. I want to thank everyone from the Crusade for working with us on this. Tonight we're gathered to talk about voting in politics. Nothing new under the sun. This is actually the third year in a row that we've had conversations as part of this series related to voting rights. And it's a topic that keeps giving, doesn't it? A topic that certainly tonight we bring together, I don't know, some amazing legends, but more than legends, people that are still at it and working in this community. And I am so humbled to be in this group of folks tonight. And we're glad that you're here. I'm also glad, I guess, so I'm just kidding, to welcome back Kelly Lemon, our co-host, business owner, whatever the heck she's doing now, just an amazing person in our community who's been with us for a very long time with this series. And we've really count on Kelly's working with us on this particular project. And thank you again, Kelly. So tonight we're talking about voting and looking back at some of the tactics that leaders have employed to shape the electorate and to impact our vote. We'll begin with a little bit of history about Richmond City's annexation in Chesterfield in 1970 and the legal battle that ensued and the major players resisting this legislation. And then we'll have our panel discussion with these amazing public servants. Dr. William Ferguson, Reid, co-founder of the Richmond Crusade for Voters, Henry Marsh III, Senator Henry Marsh III, Chuck Richardson, former city council member. By the way, Chuck, hold up your book. Before this is over, there'll be a commercial for the book, but there's a new book out, and I'm sure Chuck will talk a little bit about it before the night's over. But you got to buy a book. You got to buy a book before the night. These guys really worked so hard in fighting against the annexation, and we will be able to hear about their life and their experience with this major issue. And then we'll close out the conversation with Liz White, who's the executive director of One Virginia 2021, about how redistricting is affecting us today, and certainly that process is ongoing right now. And then as we finish up, Helen Delbridge from the Community Foundation, our partners in the series, will actually give us a couple things we can do tonight. That if you want to get involved in assuring voting rights in Virginia, there's things that you can do to sign up organizations that can support us. So, but before we jump into all this history and these discussions, we're going to take a little quick poll to see where everybody is on things. So, Liz, you want to do our little quick poll?
Sure thing. You should see this pop up on your screen. First question is, where do you live? These are the Richmond Planning District Commission localities. So we have Ashland, Charles City, Chesterfield, Goochland, Hanover, Henrico, New Kent, Powhatan, or Richmond. And then secondly, we just wanted to get a sense of how folks are feeling about these topics. How familiar are you with the topics of annexation and redistricting? So totally new to them, no prior knowledge, maybe some prior knowledge, a lot of prior knowledge, and then I am an expert on these topics. Give it just another minute or two more. Looks like good portion of folks have weighed in. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead. If anyone didn't have the poll work for them and they want to drop their answer in the chat, I will also say that we're going to use the chat tonight. You can put questions in there, and feel free to weigh in and chat amongst yourselves in the chat. All right, so I'm going to share this. Hopefully you can see it. So where do we live? We have Chesterfield, Henrico, and Richmond showing up tonight. Our other jurisdictions, not so much. 22% of folks from Chesterfield. We'll be talking about Chesterfield tonight. 24 from Henrico, and then 54 from Richmond City. And then, how familiar are you with the topics of annexation and redistricting? Few people who, or one person who said, not too familiar. Some prior knowledge, that was definitely the large majority at 62%. A good bit of prior knowledge at 30%. And then 2 folks that are experts. I certainly know that we have some experts here. So, all right. Thank you. Like I said, drop in the chat if you have any comments. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Bill.
So we're going to do a quick overview of this period. I see Joelle Goolsby here. Joelle, wave. Joelle did all of the research for this project this evening, and so I want to thank her for creating my words for our discussion. And so let's just talk a little bit through this important research. Like many American cities following World War II, Richmond experienced a dramatic demographic shift. As Richmond's Black population grew in numbers and political strength, many white middle-class Richmonders began moving from the city to neighboring suburbs of Henrico and Chesterfield County. By the late 1960s, census data revealed that Richmond was soon to become a majority Black city. And in the years that followed, Richmonders witnessed a racial power struggle unfold in local politics. Those who had historically held political power and economic power in the city sought to retain control through a number of methods, one of which was urban planning. In the late 1960s, Richmond Mayor Philip J. Bagley, and other high-ranking players in local government hatched a plan so discriminatory that the Supreme Court of the United States ultimately had to intervene. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about that period, Richmond's 1970s annexation of 23 miles of Chesterfield County, and its aftermath, as well as the crucial role played by Black grassroots organizations in challenging this legislation, such as the Richmond Crusade for Voters. This period serves as a fascinating example of the way leaders have manipulated the electorate to challenge at the core, the democratic process. And I think that that's important for us, that this was a challenge to how we function as a democracy. This was a major challenge. And so starting with the election of Oliver Hill in 1948, Black Richmonders had intermittently won a few seats in city council during the 20th century. The same year, Richmond City decided to abandon its bloated 32-member city council structure in favor of a slimmer 9-member council elected by the city's population at large. And I think this is a critical factor, that we move from a much more locally based ward system to at-large elections, which allowed another manipulation of voting. This change really was at the time garnered support from both Black and white voters, but ultimately it allowed white control over local politics, so long as white voters remained the majority of the city. But that was not the case. However, what we find is by 1960, Richmond's Black population had grown to 42%. And that's an interesting number because that's essentially the number, according to the most recent census, of Richmond's Black population today. 9 years later, in 1969, Richmond's population made up 52% of Richmond's city and 42% of Richmond's total vote. This was a major shift in political influence in Richmond City's government. The growth of Black Richmonders' influence wasn't just due to its changing population. It was also the result of grassroots organizing and the civil rights movement. Local organizers like the Richmond Crusade for Voters, which we'll hear about in a moment, organized voter registration drives in cooperation with Black churches. So how did this all end up? Richmond had certainly absorbed adjacent parts of the city before. There was a consolidation of Manchester in 1910. At this time, politicians argued that annexation of Chesterfield would allow the city to generate new commerce, industry, and revenue. What was left unspoken was the racial motivation for this deal. This legislation directly was a response to Richmond's changing population makeup and a shift in political power. At the same time this population shift is becoming apparent, Richmond Mayor Phil Bagley negotiated with the Chesterfield County's chairman, Erwin Horner, and his fellow representatives for the annexation of an area of Chesterfield County between the James River, Chippenham Parkway, and Huguenot Road. They ultimately settled on a $55 million price tag to gain the land, and with it, they gained 47,000 residents. 98% were white. Begun with the approval of the General Assembly in 1968, the annexation process was officially rolling despite popular protests from both the Black and white communities. Chesterfield County agreed not to appeal the annexation, and the state of Virginia made sure that it would be implemented speedily. On the morning of January 1st, 1970, 23 square miles of Chesterfield County and 47,000 people became residents of the city of Richmond overnight, just in time for city council election that September. The most influential of the grassroots organizations that led the challenge against annexation was the Richmond Crusade for Voters, founded by young local Black professionals in 1958. The Crusade worked to mobilize the Black vote into a cohesive unit. The Crusade worked with local churches, vital hubs for the Black community, and ran an aggressive voter registration campaigns and continues to run aggressive campaigns. After the annexation passed in 1970, a local activist and tenant association leader in Creighton Court Public Housing, Curtis Holt Sr., led the legal battle against the city. With the support of the Crusade and the NAACP, Holt sued the city twice over the annexation in rapid succession. First, and it's called Holt 1, the first challenge was on constitutional grounds. The second was a violation of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. From February 1971 to November 1976, 6 different judicial bodies reviewed arguments presented in Holt and a countersuit that was brought by the city. Holt's first case was dismissed, which allowed Richmond to keep the land it had gained from Chesterfield. However, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the annexation was motivated by racial discrimination, and this decision rendered the 1970 election fraudulent. With the ruling, the Supreme Court placed a moratorium on elections until the end of litigation, and the city was ordered to revert to a ward system for elections, which meant that each of the 9 councilmen represented their respective districts would elect a mayor among themselves. Can you imagine? Local elections were suspended for 7 years, with their restitution only in 1977. Imagine being trapped on city council together for 7 years, and at least one person in a room, 2 people in a room were part of that. After almost a decade without the right to vote, invigorated Black voters who had by this point retaken the majority population and were more fairly represented under the ward system, elected 5 Black council members, with Henry Marsh elected the first Black mayor of Richmond. Thank you, Henry. What a moment that would have been, and thank you. Since then, Black Richmonders have largely retained a majority in city council elections. In hindsight, it seems extraordinary that actions taken by Richmond's white community actually only hastened the inevitable. In the years that followed, much of Richmond's wealthy white population further retreated into the suburbs, draining the very tax revenue for which the city had paid tens of millions of dollars in annexation, not to mention the public funding for those who remained. And so we begin, that is our background tonight. I mean, I think for most people in Richmond, most people do not realize that Richmond did not have elections for 7 years. And because of the litigation of this period and the hold on elections by the Supreme Court, we have the ward system that we have today. And we have, because of the people in our room tonight, we have a very differently structured political city. And I want to thank the Crusade and our panelists for being with us this evening to talk a little bit about that. And it's really a pleasure to turn over now to Kelly Lemon, who will lead these guys in a conversation. I don't know where this is going to go, but it should be interesting.
Thank you, Bill. And like you said, it is just an honor and a privilege to be able to have this conversation tonight with these three legends in this arena, and to be able to give you all your flowers right now, and for people to learn more and more about how you all set the way for politics in Richmond. So I have some bios, and as Senator Marsh has already told us, we have to keep the agenda moving and make sure that we save time for questions and comments. But I am going to read the bios real quick before we get into the question and answer period with these three gentlemen. So first up is Henry L. Marsh III. He's an honors graduate of Maggie L. Walker High School and has a BA degree from Virginia Union University, and has earned his law degree at Howard University. He began a legal career in 1961, working with noted civil rights attorney Oliver W. Hill Sr. and Samuel W. Tucker as a partner with the law firm Hill, Tucker, and Marsh. Early in his practice, he enlisted in the fight against the policy of massive resistance, handing more than 50 cases against school boards across the state involving desegregation. He also successfully litigated over 20 employment discrimination cases, most of which were high class action cases representing thousands of African-American female litigants. During his legal career, Marsh became one of the leading attorneys of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund as a member of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. In addition, being a civil rights attorney, Marsh enjoyed a long political career. He served on the Richmond City Council from 1966 to 1991, during which time he was elected as vice mayor in 1970, and as Richmond's first African-American mayor in 1977. During his tenure as a local leader, a few of the other notable successes included being founder of the Richmond Renaissance, which now is known as Venture Richmond, co-founder of the Metropolitan Economic Development Council, and the founder of Blacks Mobilizing Against Crime. In 1991, Marsh was elected to the Virginia State Senate, representing the 16th Senatorial District. Marsh enjoys senior status on several General Assembly committees until 2014, when he was appointed as the commissioner of the Virginia Department of Alcohol Beverage Control. Marsh retired from official public service in 2017. Dr. William Ferguson Fergie Reid. Dr. Reid was born March 18th, 1925 in Richmond, Virginia. He graduated from Armstrong High School in 1941 and Virginia Union University in 1946. Dr. Reid earned his medical degree from Howard University and completed an internship in surgical residency at Homer G. Phillips Hospital in St. Louis. He served 2 years in the military, 1 year in Korea with the 1st Marine Division, and another year at the United States Naval Hospital in Bethesda, Maryland. In 1955, he opened a private surgical practice in Richmond, and he served the community for 22 years. In 1956, Dr. Reid co-founded the Richmond Crusade for voters to register and mobilize voters during massive resistance. The crusade helped to guide Black political maltration and accumulated the election of the first Black majority of Richmond City Council, which picked Henry L. Marsh III as the city's first Black mayor in 1977. From 1968 to 1973, Dr. Reid served as the first Black member of the Virginia General Assembly. In 1977, he went to work for the Department of the State as one of their regional medical officers. And in 2008, the Virginia General Assembly honored Dr. Reid for his numerous civic, medical, political, and community contributions. Today, Dr. Reid is still politically active. He mentors candidates on how to win elections. He mentors activists on the best ways to play the game. And Dr. Reid is a true friend and a hero to many. Henry Wallace Chuck Richardson is best known for his 19 years of service as the 5th District City Council representative. During his tenure, City Councilman Richardson was instrumental in the development of a number of community projects, including the Arthur Ashe statue, adoption of the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, 5 years prior to it being a federal holiday, tax abatement for the elderly, 30% set aside for minority contractors, and introducing the super can and cable television to our city. He's also instrumental in the development of the Carytown Merchants Association and minority business development. Additionally, Councilman Richardson worked with Virginia Governor John Dalton on VCU's development of south of Cary Street, finding alternatives to the use of intimate domain. Mr. Richardson is also known as an outspoken advocate for the needs of the poor and downtrodden and the LGBTQ community and those without a voice. Most recently, he captured his story in public service in his autobiography, Cease Fire, where he shares the good, the bad, and the unfiltered truth as a public figure, Vietnam veteran, and recovering heroin addict. Mr. Richardson is a decorated Marine with 2 Purple Hearts, Cross of Gallantry, and Combat Action Medal for his service in the Vietnam War. He is also a widower of 2 children, 6 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren, and he enjoys outdoors, playing golf, and often displays his artistic talent by sculpting. Let's welcome this esteemed panel to tonight's controversy history. I am so glad that I get to talk to you 3. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, let's jump right into it. The first question is for you, Dr. Reid. We would love to hear more about the founding of the Richmond Crusade for voters and what leaders in the community actually inspired you.
Well, when I returned to Richmond from the military, they were in the heights of a controversial vote to save our schools. And we all know that we lost. The turnout of the blacks was pitiful. I think less than 5,000 blacks voted at that time. So those of us who were active in the NAACP, there was a committee called the Voter Registration Committee. But the NAACP was under fire from the Virginia General Assembly. The General Assembly wanted the membership list of the NAACP throughout Virginia. So the NAACP fought that. But they decided that because of the controversy with the state, it would be best to do away with their voter registration committee. So as a result of that, Johnny Brooks and Bill Thornton, with other members of the NAACP voter registration committee, thought that they would decide, create a new committee just for voter registration. They had Bill and Johnny sent out notices to everybody for the meeting to be at the Mount Moriah Church. On that night, I was the only one who showed up. So we decided, the 3 of us decided to start making plans as how we could get more people involved and as a result of that, it later developed into the Crusade for Voters.
A real follow-up, how did you all mobilize the community, after the annexation and when elections were paused for 7 years? How did you get people riled up?
Well, we were motivated even before annexation. In 1948, when the city council had to change, there was a black group called Richmond City Council, and they negotiated with the white counterparts that in order to get the black vote, they would have to assure that a black would be on city council. And they suggested Oliver Hill to be that. As a result of them putting Oliver on the slate, they endorsed the change in city government. So blacks were involved. The Crusade got involved in 1965. We decided that there was no organization doing voter registration. So we would just exclusively limit all of our activities to voter registration, education, and get out to vote. So over that period of time, we were gradually, voter registration, we got more and more blacks involved.
Thank you. Senator Marsh, this next question is for you. We just heard about the, how after the fight over annexation, you were elected mayor of Richmond. What sort of challenges did you experience during your time as mayor? And what were your strategies? How did you overcome those obstacles?
Thank you. I had numerous challenges. Richmond had a history of being the capital of the Confederacy. And the election of an African-American mayor and 5 African-Americans on 9 council members caused quite a stir. But we banded together, and for a few years, we provided leadership to break up the polarization. Keith Justice Moore approached me and said, "Henry, there's so much polarization, we can't get anything done like this. Why don't you join with some of us in the business community and have a partnership? And we can move the city forward. Okay, as long as we keep it equal." So Richmond Renaissance was formed with a certain number of blacks and a certain number of whites. We provided advice to the city council, but it was up to the city council to decide what policy to adopt. That worked for a while. We were cited nationally for a model way of cooperation. After a little while, things changed. Council members were changed, and the black population continued to grow, so they got to de-annex to some of us started to dilute the black vote. And the case was taken to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that purpose of annexation was a legitimate purpose, but what they did was they cut it short so they could get the result for the next election. Therefore, that was illegal. That the purpose was to dilute the black vote. So as a result, elections were frozen, and when it was, there's something called pre-clearance. In order for a change in the voting procedure, you had to pre-clear it with the Justice Department, and the city had not cleared the annexation. That was a change. So as a result, the Supreme Court held that the purpose of the election was to dilute the vote, because they cut the elections, cut the time pretty short so they could avoid the next census. So that's why, as a result, the city was given a choice: either give the territory back, or go to a 9-member system. And that's how we got 5 out of 9. The city decided they didn't want to get a territory back. So we had 5 out of 9 black, and of course I was elected the mayor at the time. And we selected Henry Valentine as the vice mayor. He was an investment giant, but we felt that to placate the white community, we would get their representative as almost a partner. We couldn't get anything done, so we just said, let's form a private organization and break the Altria. So that's how Richmond Renaissance was formed. Richmond Renaissance got a lot of recognition and awards for an ideal way of integrating African Americans and whites together. So that's how we had to freeze on elections for 7 years. When the freeze was over, the Supreme Court said, all right, you got a choice. Give territory back. We get 5 districts where each part have a chance. And so they selected the 5 districts. And we won 5 of the 9 districts. And I was elected mayor. The rest is history. But it was a great result. And the black community was very happy that we had an African American mayor.
Yes.
That's it.
Thank you, Senator Marsh. Thank you. Councilman Richardson, I know you just went on mute, but if you could unmute yourself, this next question is for you.
Yes, I'm prepared.
There
I
we
hope.
go. All right. You were also elected to city council, as Senator Marsh was just discussing, after the annexation fight. What was your most distinctive memories of serving on city council during this period? And were city council votes frequently split amongst racial lines?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Kelly. The most distinct memory I have is the conflict between the black and white faction, which was expected and was very necessary. Henry is very kind, but he handled some very awkward moments that I was very unprepared to deal with, because the racial divide at that time was not hidden. It was not inconspicuous. It was a direct, open confrontation. We had 5 districts that were solidly black. 4 districts that were solidly black, and 4 districts that were solidly white. And there was one district, the swing district, which I was in, that would determine who was going to be the mayor. Whoever won that district, and there were 3 strong blacks running and 1 white, and people assumed that it was going to be won by a white. What happened was that I won that district by 8 votes. And I was going to vote for mayor. It was Henry Marsh, because he was always known to be the senior, and he knew more. And I knew I wasn't able to do it, even though some of the white members wanted to unseat Henry after his first term. But the most distinct memory I have, unfortunately, is the 5-4 vote that was in favor of the 5 blacks. And the newspapers excoriated us, criticized us, condemned Henry, and called us everything except the child of God, because we were voting along racial lines. It was a false expectation, because when you are not involved in the government for over 250 years, this city was established in 1739. And when, from that time up until 1948, blacks had very little, if any, say so in government. So when you have been oppressed for over 200 years, and then all of a sudden you be in power, you would expect changes. And in instituting those changes, the newspapers condemned us as if it was strange that we wouldn't get on council and do the same thing that white people did. That would have been absurd. So the thing I remember is the newspaper articles that condemned us. They never told why they were against the 5-4 votes. They only said, we're tired of this racist 5-4. Why does everything have to be 5-4? And they ran so many articles that some blacks started to, without proclivity to be so kind and forgiving, some blacks fell for it. And that's when Willie Dell lost a seat in the third. They thought that we should have been kinder, that we should have had more interracial voting, that it shouldn't be 5-4, as if we hadn't been involved in government for 200 years and all of a sudden we're going to get in office and do the same thing they did. That was the reason we had an election, to bring about change. And you cannot institute change without conflict. Anyway, there were some other issues. And the thing I'm proud of is that there's not always agreement among us. Henry and I disagreed on some things. Henry, although I forgave him, Henry didn't endorse me the first election, but I knew that our personal squabbles were inconsequential compared with the need for unity. And the thing I'm proud of is that despite all of our differences, we always gave the public appearance of unity. And that's what sustained our 5-member city council majority. And since then, things have changed significantly. And of course, I was in politics because they had asked my father-in-law to run, Dr. Ford T. Johnson. And he refused, and he told me, well, Chuck, you know as much about government as I do, because I had worked at the Richmond Regional Planning District Commission for 6 years. So happened that when I was elected, I was able to work with both sides. And Miss Carolyn Wake on council at that time, she tried to upset our unity by nominating me to be the mayor in, when was it, Henry, 1982 or, 81, 80. Anyway, I'm glad that we were able to maintain that unity. But in 1982, when Roy West won, he did something that I wouldn't do. And that is, he joined with the 4 whites to vote for himself and disrupt the unity that the blacks had had. And the city changed because from 1977 to 1982, black people in Richmond had a sense of pride, a sense of dignity. They felt power that they had never possessed before. They went from the sense of nobodiness to a sense that they were proud to be in Richmond, and there was a total change in spirit in Richmond. And I remember those days, and we have not had that sense of dignity since then. Those 5 years that Henry was the mayor was quite a different city.
Thank you so much, Councilman Richardson. Dr. Reid, I'm going to ask you to come off of mute and come back to you for the next question. And Councilman Richardson, if I could ask you to go on mute so that we can make sure we can hear each other.
To go on what?
Go on mute for me. If you could just go back on mute until I call you again. Yeah, there we go. All right. Dr. Reid, after founding the Crusade, you went to serve 2 terms in the General Assembly starting in 1968. Can you tell us about your time in office and what your legislative priorities were at that time?
Well, the first thing was to find my way around the Capitol and make acquaintances and friends with others. Several of the delegates who were in my class, Alan Diamondstein, several others, were moderates. So I had to first find out who the moderates were and people who were not having prejudices and not preconceived notions about race. So it took me a little time to kind of get a group that I could work with. One of the issues at that time was open housing. And one of the bills that I introduced was with many sponsors. Co-sponsors was open housing. and we were able to get that through. Other things that I worked on were getting more women involved and clearing up the code with a lot of the segregationist bills still on the code. We were able to work with other Democrats. One of the problems that we had in Richmond was that the Democratic Party made it very difficult for Blacks to get involved. So working with some of the Democrats from Richmond, we were able to open up that party into accepting more Blacks. And one of the things we wanted to do, whereas the Crusade was nonpartisan, Professor Tinsley Spraggins was highly partisan. He and I were the ones that took it upon ourselves to try to integrate the Democratic Party. As a result of the Crusade, several of the cities in Virginia invited Bill and Johnny to come down and discuss with them how to get involved in politics. And we were able to get other Blacks involved in Newport News, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Roanoke, Lynchburg by going around meeting with them. So I was working in the General Assembly and also working trying to expand the number of Negro voters throughout the state of Virginia.
Thank you, Dr. Reid. Thank you. Senator Marsh, this next question is for you. Before entering politics, you successfully litigated a number of cases dealing with school desegregation and employee discrimination. Which case are you most proud of when you reflect on your career?
Thank you. It's difficult because I had about 60 cases I was involved in. The one that took most of my time was Brewer versus the city of Norfolk. That case lasted over 20 years. I would win the case. I would lose the case in district court for Judge Hoffman. He'd go up to the Court of Appeals and he'd send it back down. And that was back and forth till finally I caught Judge Hoffman out of town. And the new Judge McKenzie was on the case. And I convinced Judge McKenzie to bind and desegregate the schools with equal percentage of teachers in each school and equal percentage of students in each school were Black and white, and also to provide free transportation for the kids in Norfolk because they couldn't matriculate unless they gave free transportation. Plus, we got attorney's fees for part of the case. So that was a 20-year battle. And the only reason we won, I think, was because Judge Hoffman was a prominent judge. They sent him to Las Vegas. And while he was gone, I got Judge McKenzie to do the right thing. And when Judge Hoffman came back, he said, "Hey, you tricked me." I said, "No, Judge, I didn't know you could be going." "Yes, you know what you did. You got." I said, "No, Judge, he knew I'd gotten him, but nothing he could do about it." But that was the most significant case. And when it was time to get a case to the Supreme Court, the court had to decide between Norfolk and Swan in Charlotte, North Carolina. A friend of mine, Julius Chambers, argued the Swan case. And the court picked Swan because North Carolina had a different system. City was a part of the county in which he said Charlotte, which is said Charlotte was a part of Mecklenburg. But in Richmond, cities and counties were distinct, which is unusual. So they picked Swan, and therefore Swan was a landmark case. And Julius Chambers argued it and was successful. But you limited me to school desegregation and employment discrimination. We had all kinds of discrimination. One area which isn't known was a Federal Communications Commission. They had a ruling, And the TV stations were all white. Blacks weren't involved. So I filed a petition against the Channel 6, and the court ruled that TV stations, Channel 6 had to desegregate and set up an internship. And as a result of that, the interns became the news persons for all the channels in the region. And that's how desegregation of the television was accomplished, not by court order, but by Federal Communication Commission. That was important because before then, you only saw white people on TV, and black people were in sort of servant positions. That opened television, not only for Channel 6, but all other channels, seeing blacks and whites on TV. And now you very rarely see a program where you don't have a mixture of blacks and whites. So there are other cases, but I just mentioned those to see a few. But we had a case that created attorney's fees. And Bell versus Powhatan. School board made us run around, keep moving the phones. And the district judge ruled that that was a precedent. Therefore, they had to pay our attorney's fees. And HCW followed that. So all attorneys all over the country began to get attorney's fees for school cases. There are other cases, but all of them were significant. But it wasn't me doing it. It was a team, Hill, Tucker, and Marsh, and about 15 other lawyers. So.
Thank you, Senator Marsh. You actually gave me chills on the last one. I mean, just for what I do on an everyday basis, I have to personally thank you for paving that way and putting that fight out there. I wouldn't be seen if it wasn't for what you did. So thank you. Thank you. Last question for you, Councilman Richardson, if you want to unmute yourself. Since the 90s, your work has focused on the restoration of voting rights to felons. And despite the progress made in the last 5 years, what else needs to be accomplished?
Well, thank you. I am president and co-founder along with former mayor of Atlanta, Maynard Jackson. He was on my board and he passed on, but I'm still continue to work. And it's called NORO, National Organization of Rehabilitated Offenders. What we have done is assist all returning inmates who have been classified as felons, urge them. I've gone around to speak at different places and assist felons to get their voting rights restored. We had, and this is a considered voter suppression. And what happens is that people continue to suffer after they've paid their dues. When you pay for your house, your mortgage is burned. When you get out of jail and you're a felon, you continue to suffer the atrocities of discrimination. And when people see you coming and they see that felon tag, you are discriminated against. I have been working to have the effects of a felony title eliminated. Once a person has paid their debt to society, they don't need to be called felons. They don't need to be classified as felons. They don't need to be treated as felons. They need to be given a clear bill of health, so to speak. So we need to make sure that all potential voters, including those, because we have so many. At the last election, I received the statistic that we had almost 4 to 5 million people who were eligible to vote and didn't even register. And we had 6.5 million who were registered and didn't vote. Now, that amounted to a number of millions of votes. If we were to vote, and we must change the narrative of what a man is. The black men need to understand that manhood has nothing to do with how much money you have. It has nothing to do with how big the house you live in, how much money you make, how many women you have, none of that. If I ask a man, where is your voter registration card and do you vote, and they tell me no, it's not a full man in my eyes. So we need to change the narrative as a people. and start promoting the doctrine that manhood in America has to do with whether or not you vote. And if you don't vote, nothing else you brag about means anything. To me, Chuck Richardson, if you don't carry a voter registration card, I don't care how big your muscles are, how much money you have, you're nothing but a chump to me if you don't vote. And we need to inculcate that type of thinking into the hearts and minds of black men. Because if all of us voted, not just the felons, but if all of us voted and stopped depending on someone else to do our work, thinking that our vote doesn't, every vote counts, and if you ignore your responsibility, you may as well let somebody else pay your house note, your car note, your grocery bill, and take care of your wife for you. You need to get off your behinds and understand that voting is an essential responsibility of every man who considers himself a man. And if we did that, we wouldn't have to worry about this foolishness that Mr. Trump is doing, or the kind of ideals he has fostered in this country that is almost tearing our democracy apart. If we don't get up and vote, we could solve our own problem. We wouldn't have to worry about anybody else taking care. We could change the whole narrative of what America is doing right now. So that's what I would do. I would emphasize the vote.
You have always kept it all the way real. We thank you for keeping it honest in answering these questions. We are, as we like to keep the program moving, we also like to be honoring people's time, and we are trying to keep this at ending it at 6:45. We do have another panelist that we need to bring on. We would invite you to ask questions in the chat. If you would like to ask any questions of these panelists, and I have one more question, and we see the book that is up, Ceasefire, Ceasefire. But
all of those things are in the book that I talked about. All of those reasons we should vote, the many stories, all of them, what happened on city council, the part that nobody told you all about, that Henry knows, that Doug Wilder, that former city manager, that Manny Dees, they know some of these stories in this book, but the average person never heard them. Read this, and you're going to find out some things that would blow your mind.
Can't wait. I cannot wait. All right. If anyone has any questions for the panelists, please make sure that you place them in the chat. And, you know, as we are waiting for questions to pop up, anyone can take, you know, this question. You know, what are you concerned about today when it comes to voting rights and our elections? Any one of you all can take that question.
I'll volunteer for it.
Okay.
I think our greatest challenge today is voter apathy. As Chuck pointed out, we don't get 100%. We don't get 75%. And very rarely do we get 50% of people already registered to vote. They don't take it seriously. And the reason why we are in jeopardy of control by Mr. Trump is because we don't take the voting seriously. When we vote, as they did in Georgia, we won 2 seats and it helped us get the majority in the presidency. But we could lose it in the midterm if we don't vote. So Chuck and I are in agreement about one thing. You don't count. You are no count if you don't vote, because you're dragging the rest of us down. And you know, we had pre-clearance. That's how we got the situation in Richmond. Before a state could adopt a procedure, it had to be cleared, pre-cleared in the Justice Department. And that kept the southern states at bay. But when Trump got in, he let the pre-clearance thing lapse. And now we don't have it. And that's why southern states are rushing to try to get practices in before we can do anything about it. Also, they want to get a chance to deny a woman's right to choose. And I think that was a mistake, because now we have another group of voters who weren't participating before, but now because their daughters and granddaughters have to go through hell, so to speak, they are going to vote. So I think we have a chance. The midterms, that's the key. We have to vote in the midterms because the practices that are erected against us still stand unless we get them stopped. And in Georgia, folks stood in lines. They couldn't get water. They did everything, and we voted. We shouldn't have to do that. And if we get 100% or even 90% of the people who are already registered voting, we don't have to worry. We elected a man named Barack Obama, which sounds like it's horrible, but he got the greatest margin, and he got Obamacare, and he gave us a chance. But now it's up to us. Let's vote.
Thank you, Senator Marsh. We have a question in the comment section, and I am going to start with the first one. And this is to any one of you all to answer. Do you all see a return of white corporate dominance in Richmond?
When did it leave? When Henry Marsh and the four of us initiated a move to fire the first white city manager we had, I called it the $30 billion meeting. Those men on Main Street summoned us, said, you come down here to 8th and Main, and Henry called us, and all of us except Willie Dale went down to Main, and all of these men sitting around the table, $30 billion worth. They asked us what were our intentions about the city manager. They wanted to stop us, and the manager by law works at the pleasure of city council, and they wanted to tell us that they were going to decide who the manager was, which was a violation. First of all, it was an illegal meeting because we were not supposed to have 2 or more members of city council in the same meeting discussing public business without notification. So that was one, but they didn't care. This was the second massive resistance move where they took all of their money and beckoned those little pickaninnies down to a basement and gonna tell us what to do. And that was the proudest moment of city council that Henry Marsh provided for me. They expected us to go in and do battle with them about why we were going to fire Bill Leininger. And Henry stood up after all of the talking, and the man who spoke was A.J. Brent. He was a newspaper attorney for the news leader, and he was like the prosecuting attorney on Perry Mason. He was nasty. Henry stood up after all the shenanigans, and Henry said, we appreciate your interest, but we're going to let you all know what we can do about the city manager when we let the rest of the citizens know. All of them shut their mouths. Henry is lucky that they didn't shoot all of us right there on the spot for being so arrogant, but it worked and democracy prevailed. We did fire him, and there was nothing they could do, and that proved to me that we're not there. And we still have a long way to go, but at least the infrastructure of democracy in Richmond is intact enough to at least be on our way and stay on the road to make progress.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have 2 more questions. Liz and Bill, I want to ask you, I want to bring in Liz White. She's the executive director of One Virginia 2021. If we can bring Liz into this conversation so that we could just talk about where we are now, but keep asking your questions because hopefully we'll have some time and that I can come back to these last 2 questions if there's no questions for Liz. Is that okay, the Valentine crew? Is that good? Okay. All right. So if I could bring in Liz White. She, once again, is the executive director of One Virginia 2021, where she works on behalf of the organization and all Virginians to ensure that Virginia leads the way in improving the structure of our electoral system to better reflect the will of voters, thus providing for a more representative, inclusive, open, and transparent government. Liz is going to give us an update on the current redistricting process in Virginia and how we can get involved. Liz?
Hi, yeah, thank you all so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. It is crunch time in the new Virginia redistricting system. So I'm going to share my screen and take you all on a little crash course about the new system that is in place this year, and then where we are in it and how you all can get involved. It's going to be 1 second. Here we go. All right, can everyone see okay? As it's loading, there we go. All right, so my presentation, I call it creating space and amplifying community voices, because that's really the two differences in this system as opposed to the old system. There is space in this system for the public to get involved, and we're going to talk about how, and we're going to talk about why that's important. So we've got a brand new system in Virginia. You probably recall on the ballot last November, Amendment 1 created the first Virginia Redistricting Commission. It's the first of its kind in the country. It's a hybrid commission where 8 of the members are sitting legislators, 4 from the Senate, 4 from the House, and 8 of the members are citizens. It is balanced along party lines, and as I mentioned, the legislators are split between the 2 chambers. It is an incredibly transparent process, especially when you think of redistricting in the past in Virginia and in most other states. It is the old system was just whatever party was in charge of each chamber drew the maps, and they drew the maps to lock in their power for the next decade. And there wasn't any transparency or oversight or public input. And they passed them like regular bills. A governor signed off on them. And that's what dictated the next 10 years worth of legislative maps. So now we've got open meetings, we've got public input periods. We are in the middle of the second series of public hearings for the commission right now. All data and materials are subject to the Freedom of Information Act. It really is a whole lot of sunlight in a process that's never really had any before. It is citizen-led. The amendment called for a citizen chair. This commission opted to elect co-chairs, and they're bipartisan. So we have 2 citizen co-chairs. The amendment also enshrined Voting Rights Act language in the state constitution, just in case the federal law gets further gutted by a Supreme Court in the future, like some of the other parts have been in the past. And then there's new fleshed out criteria that the commission has to use when drawing these maps. I'm going to speed through this a little bit because I know you all have probably some more things to do with your evening. And all of this is available on our website, on VPAP, which is the Virginia Public Access Project, on the commission's website. The legislative members from the commission were chosen by the 4 legislative leaders, basically the top Republican, top Democrat in each chamber. These are your citizen legislators. And actually, this needs some updating. Senator Newman had to leave the commission and has been replaced with Senator Bill Stanley from Franklin. I need a new graphic. The citizen members got to apply. There was an open application process. Over 1,200 people applied to serve on this commission from all over the Commonwealth. And each of those legislative leaders created a list of at least 16 nominees. Those were selected by a 5-judge panel. The finalists were chosen by that 5-judge panel, retired circuit court judges. And we ended up with 8 citizen members. So this is your list of your Virginia redistricting commissioners for 2021. It does a pretty good job of covering a lot of different demographics, geographic diversity and racial and ethnic diversity, language diversity. We did unfortunately lose the only member of the commission from Southwest Virginia. He also had to step back. But they are, I think, doing it. They're very aware of making sure all sections of the Commonwealth are attended to and taken into consideration. I think they're doing a good job of that. So timeline and kind of where we are right now, as you all probably know, because of COVID, the receipt of the census data, which is what redistricting is based on. We redistrict, every state redistricts every 10 years after the decennial census. So because the census data was delayed by like 6 or 7 months, usually we'd be done with this back in April or May, and we'd be talking about something else tonight. But since the census data was so delayed, it did not arrive until August. The commission made the decision to August 12th is when the Census Bureau released data. The commission and their lawyers made the determination that they're going to start their 45-day clock on August 26th, which is when they were able to put all of the data into a usable format in their software, and also to reapportion incarcerated people in Virginia, because we also just passed a law outlawing what's called prison gerrymandering. The old system was to count incarcerated people in the jail or prison where they are currently housed, as opposed to in their last known address, which ends up giving outsized voting power to the citizens of the areas that have the jails or prisons. So it was a major victory to pass that. Virginia is one of about a dozen to 13 states that have eliminated prison gerrymandering, but did take some extra time to sort that out with the data. So August 26th was day one. October 11th is the deadline. So we are fast approaching this deadline for the end of this 45 days, where the commission has to present maps for the House of Delegates and the state Senate to the General Assembly. The General Assembly, and you get 60 days for the congressional seats. So they have not even touched those yet. General Assembly gets an up or down vote within 15 days. If they vote down the maps that the commission has passed, the commission gets one more shot at it, can go back over to the General Assembly. They get a little back and forth. The General Assembly is not allowed to make amendments to the maps. They're allowed to give comments, sure, or make floor speeches or suggestions, but they have to up or down vote the House and Senate maps as a package deal. Now, the threshold for getting out of the commission in the first place is pretty high. You have to have a supermajority. 6 out of 8 citizens have to vote for any map, and 6 out of 8 legislators also have to vote for it. And the only additional caveat there is, for example, if it's a House of Delegates map, the 2 no votes from the legislators can't be the 2 House Republicans or the 2 House Democrats. So in essence, every caucus gets a veto, which hopefully kind of eliminates some of the interchamber shenanigans that have happened in the past. So if the commission can't pass something with that, can't meet that threshold, or if the General Assembly votes it down a second time, the Supreme Court of Virginia is going to be tasked with establishing the maps. They have to follow a lot of the same criteria. They have to allow for public comment. They have to hire 2 special masters who are professional map drawers, one nominated by Democrats, one nominated by Republicans. So a lot of safeguards and checks and balances throughout the system. So most importantly, what you can do, even at this late date. So I mentioned we're in the middle of public hearings. The 4th through the 7th was the second round. So you have to sign up 24 hours in advance. So right now, the only one left that you could really sign up for, there's a 10 a.m. on Thursday and a 4 p.m. on Thursday. They're regionally focused, but because they are all virtual, it is way more important that you are heard than that you're heard in the Richmond meeting, which is tomorrow evening. So you can sign up to speak, and I'll include links in the chat and make sure you all have all this information. We've got some training videos. We did an hour-long training with the League of Women Voters and the Delta Sigma Theta sorority and the civic engagement table the other night that goes into a lot of this information in depth. We also have a 2-minute video where you just get to watch me talk about some tips for testifying, which is a much quicker way to get through that. And step 3 is you get to advocate for your community, and you get to help the commission arm themselves with information so that they can do their best to fairly and accurately represent all Virginians with these maps. If you go to the virginiaredistricting.org, that is the commission's website, here's what you'll see along the right side. I highlighted the 3 places I go because I live on that website. Meetings and public hearings, you get the calendars and all of the links to either watch recorded past events or the links to sign up to speak, the links to watch the live stream, etc. A lot of good information. You can view the 2021 plans and comment. You can look at every draft map that's been considered by the commission, submitted by a member of the public. You can really get in there and poke around, and you can leave comments directly on it. So if testifying isn't your thing, or that doesn't fit into your schedule, or you miss the cutoff to sign up, that's okay. There are so many other ways to make yourself heard in this process. And that's one of the, I think the most interesting ones is you just get to kind of drop a pin and say, I love what you've done here. This is terrible. You really should scooch this over and be better. Why are you cutting up this community? Whatever you need to tell them, you can tell them on a specific draft of the map and with specific instructions. And then if you aren't sure what a testimony looks like, if you aren't sure what you should be getting out of these maps of the Richmond area, you can also look, I find it very helpful to look at other comments that have been submitted, and you can sort by regions. You can look in the central region, which is kind of everything Richmond to like Charlottesville and everything around those 2 cities, and see what other people are saying. And you might go, oh yeah, hey, they're right. Or you might disagree, but I think that that's helpful. And then you get kind of a critical mass, and you get a handful of people saying the same thing. And honestly, we've watched several instances through this process of 6, 8, 10 people say the same thing. And all of a sudden it feels like this tidal wave of input, and it becomes very hard for them to ignore it. So comment, bring your friends. There's still a lot of opportunity to be heard as long as you do that in the next few days. So that is the really short and sweet version of everything that's going on. That's all my contact info, which I'm also happy to put in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'm happy to take questions. And like I said, I'll put all of these helpful hints in the chat.
Thank you, Liz. And
thank you so much
yes,
for having me.
We already have some people that have started to give some information already in the chat. This also is going to be available on our website, and also we can send you out more information if you just contact the good folks over at the Valentine. We'll make sure that some of this can be emailed. However you need this communication readily available to you, we can make that happen for you. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We are over time. And so again, we are going to respect anyone that needs to drop off. Feel free to do so. But we do have one last question. Well, we do have one question that I want to make sure that we do ask the panelists before we take too much of their evening away. And that was just more so a question about redistricting still. And please, anyone feel free to answer this, but with Martinsville reverting to Henry County and the discussion of Charlotte being in Mecklenburg County, while VA cities are separate by law, did any of the panelists ever consider or would consider today re-emerging with Henrico or Chesterfield County? Any of the panelists, please feel free to jump in on answering that question. Just unmute yourself.
This is Fergie. I can't see any reason why either of the counties would want to merge. I can't see the advantage. Each of the counties have different systems of government, and I just can't see the advantage.
And this is Henry Marsh. I agree with Fergie because Henrico probably has the oldest system in the country. Same persons have been in office, and they have very set routines. Their system wouldn't work in Richmond, and Chesterfield's system wouldn't work in Richmond. So I don't think that's a practical answer. I think the main thing is that we have a gubernatorial election going on right now. And if pass is in the prerogative, a lot of people are not going to vote. And I suggest, regardless of which side you're on, you should vote because, either the Democrat or the Republican or whatever. But I said, please vote because we can't go wrong if more people vote.
Thank
That's
you.
my suggestion.
Thank you both. Liz, do we have time for one last question?
Sure.
Huh?
Sure. How about that last one that just came in?
Okay. All right. Yes, let's stick with, yeah. What would your suggestion be for someone interested in running for office? That is our last question. I know that I hear your mouth moving, Chuck. We got to hear it though.
Can you repeat that question?
Yes. What advice would you give someone interested in running for office today?
The same thing I'd tell all the people who approach me. In order for you to represent people adequately, I think it is essential that you possess two things: the ability to extrapolate the issues and the things that are important to the people, to get to know the district, to understand what you're doing first, and then have the courage to speak truth to power. Because too many people get into office and are sucked in by the leadership, the financial leadership. They should understand the issues of the people they purport to represent and have the courage. And if they don't have those two things, you should go out and know the community, know their issues, and then run for office. A lot of people run for office trying to get something done after they get in the office. If you don't know what your community is about, if you don't have a genuine concern, if you don't sincerely care about the people you represent, you're not going to be successful and you're going to be found out. And don't do anything wrong for two reasons. First of all, it's morally wrong to get into office and betray the oath you've taken. And secondly, you're going to get caught.
The advice that I have would be that you have to make some contribution to the community before you run for office.
Right.
Involve school board activities or go to meetings of city council. Find out the area you want to run in. You have to know the terrain of that area. And you have to know where the people are that you can represent. So you should join organizations like Planned Parenthood or Cancer Society, Heart Society, or some type of organization so you can get your name known out into that area and make a contribution. Then when you decide to run, don't bite off more than you can chew. One of the things I see that a lot of people make mistakes, they never run for office and they run for attorney general or they run for governor. They don't know how large Virginia is. Virginia is a very, very large area. So you're going to have to know the terrain of the area that you want to run in. You have to know the organizations that are there. You have to get involved with organizations like Our Revolution or Indivisible and make a contribution in those organizations. Then you have to prepare yourself to find out if people want you to run and who's going to support you. And then you go ahead and announce for whatever office you want to run. Don't bite off more than you can chew. One of the things I want to emphasize is that Virginia has elections every year, and we tend to get tired. So we're going through an election now for November. But you can't stop in November. You can't say, well, we can't get involved in any elections in 2022. I'm going to take December off because Christmas is coming. But you have to be aware of the calendar. In May of next year, they're having school board elections. They're having school board elections in 69 jurisdictions. They're having town councils in 65 jurisdictions. They're having city councils in 179 jurisdictions. Now that's me. So those of you who have contacts in counties, you're going to have to tell them they got to get somebody for the school board. We know that the Trump and his advisors plan to take over the school boards, and that's their big issue for next year. We can't let them take over the school boards because the school boards determine what type of curriculum the people are going to have. You know, they have these false things about racial things. So that's going to be big in the school board issues. So we have to warn everybody that to remind them that you got to get people to run for school boards. And this is one of the areas where you can start at a base. So keep that in mind. And if you have friends or relatives living in districts that have May elections, tell them they have to get started now because the primary for the May elections is March. So don't wait until January to recruit. We have to start recruiting now.
Thank you, Dr. Reid.
Kelly, I think we should let Senator Marsh have the last word for this.
That's what I was about to say. Senator Marsh, can you close us out? And then we'll have maybe a quick thing from Alan from Community Foundation.
Yes, thank you very much. We're very fortunate to be in a country where we can vote. There are a lot of countries where you can't vote. We're going to lose the right to vote if we don't vote. And people say, well, you don't have to vote. We can't lose, you can lose. I've been in election contests where it was decided by 2 votes or 1 vote. So your vote is important. And there's old saying, if you don't vote, you don't count. So please vote in all elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Marsh. Thank you, Dr. Reid. Thank you so much, Council Person Richardson. We really, really, really appreciate you all taking the time on this Tuesday night to just pour into us all that you all continuously still do for the city of Richmond and beyond in how you all continuously serve us. So we are just grateful for all that you all do. We have some things on the screen. I'm going to turn this over now to Alan. Alan, you still there with Community Foundation?
Absolutely. And
Great.
Thank you for having us. And what a great conversation. And one of the big things that was brought up was around voter apathy. And so we're partnering with the organization that's called Party at the Mailbox. And so it is an organization that is designed to make absentee voting fun. This is a box that you will receive for the low price of free. On the inside, it has a bunch of cool things. If my blur won't work, but it shows Richmond votes, completely free. All you have to do is go to the website and sign up. What's the catch? Make voting fun. Make people feel like they are missing out on something. So getting folks excited about voting and the registering to vote. So as well as some additional resources about why voting is critical to civic engagement on the pointsoflight.org website. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for what a great conversation.
Thank you, Alan. As you still see on the screen, please make sure that you are following us on all of our social media and all the websites. If you have need any information, once again, about any of the information that was shared, please feel free to screenshot that screen now that is already off. But we are back again in November, election night, and hopefully, you all will have bought Chuck Richardson's book by then. You're gonna take yourself off mute one time, give yourself another plug so people can go buy that book real quick. And or at least let us know where we can find it. Where can we find the book?
We're kicking off our announcement at the Black History Museum. And because of the COVID virus, you have to register. And you look on Facebook and look for Councilman Chuck for all details. But it's very inexpensive, comparatively speaking. Mr. Obama sold his for $40-some. This one will go for half that much. Anyway, you'll enjoy the reading, and I hope you learn from from it. And the only thing I say is whoever agrees or disagrees with this book, find something that was not true. And I will be glad to be corrected, stand to be corrected.
We can't wait to join you on a book tour where we can ask you these questions.
Yes, we will be going on a book tour already. I've got people lined up. And in fact, you can find these at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon.
Yeah.
And I got a number of Carytown merchants who said you can stop in their shops. The story in this book about how, of course, I'm not going to argue with it, but people said Chuck Richardson built Carytown. So a lot of those merchants are allowing me to put my books in their businesses. So come to Carytown, and you may find it easy. And I want to thank you all. Just hope you learned something from it. And thank you all for having this program.
Thank you.
Vote.
Make sure you vote and join us on election night as we bring you another controversy history. Thank you, guys. Good night. Have a good one.